Hello, I'm Mark Uncapher, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, how about those debts? Will the state legislature raise taxes to pay for the Kirwan Commission recommendations? The county council unearths the fact that the county-owned liquor stores lose $5 million a year. Widen I-270 or build the quarter city's rapid transit line? Which reduces gridlock? Stay tuned as our panelists and insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by former County Council member Mike Knapp, Maryland Young Republican National Committeeman Evan Young, Transportation and Railroad Consultant Phil Bell, and Education activist Cynthia Rubenstein. Stay tuned for these stories and more on 21 This Week next. How about those Nats? Washington has its first World Series since the 1920s. Phil, you know that we have you on the show this week because we know that you're a dyed-in-the-wool New York Mets fan. So we want to know, did you finally break down and start cheering for the Nationals?
I wish I could give you a secret and say, well, maybe I did. I didn't. But what I can tell you is this. I'm very happy for the Washington fans. You guys deserve it. You're great fans. Even Cynthia, I saw you painted your curly W right there. And frankly, the Nationals, they played the right way. Pitching, defense, speed on the base paths, they made it fun. So congratulations.
Now, Cynthia, I know that you're not a fair weather Nats fan, but did you think at the beginning of the playoffs that they could pull this off?
No, I never think that because I remember the agonizing Game 5 in 2012 when Drew Storen virtually collapsed on the mound and the Cardinals took the NLDS, and then every other year of contention since, we seemed to collapse before we could get beyond the NLDS. So I started to believe they could win the World Series on that 27th out at the bottom of the 9th inning at Game 7. Then I knew we were in the clear.
A true believer.
I'm a true believer.
You're a real fan, yeah.
I'm just a hopeful skeptic as a fan.
I just want to point out an important fact. The best thing about the Nationals winning this is that Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen have to watch yet another DC franchise they have nothing to do with. Bring home a trophy, have a parade, have the attention. I'm glad two of the most pathetic creatures in the area, Dan Snyder and Bruce Allen, have to watch other teams celebrate while they continue to fail miserably.
That is pretty gratifying.
Yes.
I have to agree.
Well, that sounds a little like sour grapes there. But with our World Series over and the national battle lines nationally over impeachment, the battle lines here in Maryland for the 2020 legislative session are over the Kirwan Commission's education recommendation. Now, Governor Hogan has signaled that he will vigorously oppose tax increases to pay for them, while the Democrats say that this is the price to be paid for a fair education system. Mike, how do you expect the Kirwan Commission's recommendations will play out in Annapolis?
Well, it's going to be a challenge, but I think there are two potential scenarios. One is going to be that taxes start to move forward and it looks like there's going to be additional revenue sources. And if that's the case, I think you actually end up pitting the educational organizations against themselves. You have K through 12 arguing with higher education because there's now more money on the table. If there aren't additional resources on the table, I think the other alternative is that Governor Hogan actually proposes pieces of the Kirwan Commission to go forward with that you can actually pay for, like our CTE programs and early care and education. I think you could do those, and people are going to say it's supposed to be all one package, but I think that gives you the ability to say, well, here are two things we can do and get started on that are very important for the state, and take that approach.
Evan, isn't the Kirwan, what the Kirwan is proposing for the children? Can Governor Hogan win this fight on taxes?
I guess that would just come down to how unified Democrats in Annapolis are to all going forward with one plan. If they're broken up and fighting amongst themselves on different educational plans, he could win. But if they're united around one that opposes what he wants, then Governor Hogan can't win that. But since we are talking about doing what's best for the children, I think what's best would be first, before we're spending any more money, someone explaining to the parents of these children why Maryland leads the nation in administrative costs in the school systems while teachers are paying for their own supplies. Why a principal in Baltimore schools, in one school, can earn more than the governor of Maryland, but we're talking about schools that have to shut down because they can't keep the heating on sometimes. So if we're doing what's best for the children, I think questions like that should be answered first about why the current revenue isn't getting them what they want before we just start throwing more money.
Now, Cynthia, poll after poll shows that Maryland voters care deeply about education, but taxes aren't popular. Can Kirwan supporters make the case that this money is necessary?
Well, first of all, most voters who support more funding for education have never even heard of the Kirwan Commission. So they have a mountain to climb in being visible and making their case. Then additionally, the legislature has the difficult feat of figuring out revenues for this. I mean, they talk about capturing revenue from online betting, from charging sales tax, internet sales tax for out-of-state companies for more taxes, legalizing and taxing marijuana, but all that put together still would not reach that magic $4 billion that the Kirwan Commission wants to put forward.
Phil, critics say that the Commission recommendations provide for teacher salary increases, but very little in increased accountability. Can we afford to do that?
Well, I wanted to push on a point that Evan made. You're talking about administrative costs. A very interesting stat, 90 cents out of every dollar apparently goes to salaries. So why do, number one, the salaries need to be increased, first of all? And number two, here's the question, something I haven't seen in any of the Kirwan materials, which is, how does any of this $4 billion or otherwise actually improve education? And when you just think back to the basics, you have one large consumer of things that go into education, which would be the schools, state schools overall. And then you have a lot of different providers. And usually, thinking back, that tends to mean that costs should go down, not up. So I think we're already starting with a questionable theory, and there's no reason I could see to really proceed with this.
So the other piece I would put out there is, from a revenue perspective, is it's not just going to be the state's resources. Most of the counties are going to have to contribute as well, and so at least half of them that I've heard of are not willing to even go down that road. And then, depending upon what the formula allocations are going to be, even the bigger one that you would expect to be able to say we would be willing to do that are likely not to do it as well. And so you've got a whole lot of challenges: what happens in the legislature and then what happens outside the legislature. And since no one even knows the name Kirwan and what that relates to, it's going to be a pretty hard sell.
One of the questions, too, about all of this is the division of state support by county, and whether or not that creates a division among the counties. When we come back from a short break, new financial data unearthed by the County Council finds that Montgomery County's monopoly liquor stores are losing $5 million a year. Stay tuned. Montgomery County government operates a liquor monopoly. Maryland law prohibits the county liquor sellers, retailers, stores, and restaurants from selling any alcohol not purchased from the county government. Additionally, hard liquor can only be sold at county-owned and operated liquor stores. This has been justified for years because of the tens of millions of dollars of profits provided to the county. However, new data unearthed by the County Council suggests that the 25 retail stores actually are losing money and are being subsidized by the wholesale operation. Phil, should the county be in the liquor business? And if not, will it need to raise taxes to get out of it?
Well, I think, first of all, the answer is absolutely not. Number one, you have to really ask what the point of the county being in the liquor business is. Clearly, if the stores aren't generating revenue, number one. Number two, why is it that privately operated liquor wouldn't provide the same benefits to the public and obviously the county's tax base that a state, I call it state-run, but county-run monopoly does? And number three, I've been to some of the county liquor stores. You can't get the same selection, the things that you want, whether it's your Buffalo Trace or your Havana Club or you name it, that you can in a private liquor store. So no one is being served by this well. So I guess it's a very, very long-winded way of saying no, no, and no.
Pretty adamant there. Mike, as a former council member, you know all about the conflict between the restaurant industry and the county's wholesale liquor operation. Is there a way to cut the Gordian's knot and solve this problem?
I think there is, but it really requires commitment from our local government to do that. The reality is that people have been scaring folks and saying, if we pull the money away from what the liquor The DLC has been providing. You're going to end up having to try and raise taxes. You're going to have to do other things, or we're going to pull important programs away. The reality is it's $28 million on a $5.2 billion budget. I'm not saying you're going to pull it all out in 1 year, but the reality is you can start to phase that in over a 3 or 4 year period. Wean your way away from that. There's some bonds that are funded through that. You can pull that and put that into other areas. And the reality is that we could absorb that over time pretty easily. The challenge is that nobody wants to work that hard at it, because generally we can always find resources someplace else, and it's nice to have $28 million you don't have to go look for.
Evan, if the stores are losing money, is keeping the liquor monopoly about the profits, or is it about protecting union jobs?
Yeah, it's wild, Mark, because anywhere else, in anything else, if you're losing money, you get shut down. You don't get to continue doing business if you can't stay afloat on your own. But either if it's jobs or profits, neither one's really a good argument, because privately owned liquor stores that would take their place have to hire employees. Jobs would still exist, maybe even more, because you'd have more liquor stores, more variation in the types of stores, and the jobs would still exist. And the revenue, the profits would still exist, because you're still selling product, you're still paying taxes, you're still paying payroll taxes, sales taxes. And the people, we had a conversation about this ahead of time, the people who are going and spending their money outside of the county or outside of the state would then be more incentivized to come bring that money back into the state, into Montgomery County, creating more profits for the county. So whether it's profits or jobs, both will still exist outside of the government running liquor stores. The government doesn't run most types of stores, and they still have jobs, and they still create profits. So that's just not a good excuse either way.
There's one other impediment, and in the past, it has been the union jobs, the county union jobs, and there's a union advocate in Montgomery County named Gino Wren, and he does his job. He's a junkyard dog in defending those county jobs, and he has been very effective at making elected officials have reservations about coming up against him.
But let's ask a question about that. You made a very good point, and you also made a very good point. You're talking about the amount that it brings in. Now, if the liquor stores were to be privatized, because you do have an existing business, you could sell them, you could take the union jobs with them. The purchaser could say, all right, I'm going to buy it, I'll agree to allow this union to continue representing. What goes on beyond that would be up to him and his cohorts to continue those contracts. So that could be done, and those jobs could be protected, but still have a private business like any other.
Well, Cynthia, talking about this particular solution, David Trone has made millions with his Total Wine stores. That's a chain around the country. Could his company run the county stores better?
I don't think he wants that. I don't think he would want to touch that. And we need a good beer, wine, and spirits ecosystem in Montgomery County. And David Trone's company is wonderful for big box, and their employees are very knowledgeable, but you also do need your smaller proprietors. And the other thing that has always irritated me about Montgomery County is that there's one giant store where you can buy beer and wine. There's one Safeway in Montgomery County where you can buy beer and wine. That's another frustration that I wish we could get rid of. But David Trone is a very successful businessman, but I don't think he'd want this problem.
So let me just go around. How many people here buy outside Montgomery County? Buy their liquor?
You just drink water. I'm done partying.
Evan's the healthiest of us here.
Our role model.
Okay.
And I think Evan raised a great point. I mean, you're basically paying more for an inferior product, and the reality is any place else that would never last. And so I think we've got to move on and try and move that into the real world, and let's get the private sector to start operating.
There's one more thing, and I read earlier today about the county executive being the one who would need to start this ball rolling.
So it's on
But
Mark,
would he?
Mark Elbridge. Well, shifting gears or shifting lanes now, the county and the governor are at odds over transportation priorities. Governor Hogan has a plan to widen I-270, and the county has a plan for Quarter City's rapid transit project. Both are against each other's approach. Evan, buses or hot lanes, which is a better way of relieving gridlock?
You know, we live in one of the wealthiest parts outside of the nation's capital and the most advanced civilization ever. You'd think there's some way people who want both options, the brightest minds, could find a way to incorporate parts of both, because people who currently drive into DC or Northern Virginia in their cars every day, they're already choosing to not use public transportation because you're going to the store after, you're going to the gym, you're picking your kids up, you're doing other things where you need your car. A bus isn't going to make them suddenly not need to do all those things. I think the best way, though, we could reduce gridlock is sort of playing off what Mark Elrich said. He wanted more jobs in Frederick County. Well, let's have more jobs in Montgomery County. We have 12,000 fewer private sector jobs now than we did in 2006. If you are bringing and you have an environment that brings more jobs into the county, creates new businesses, Montgomery County's lagged behind the rest of the state in new business establishments over the last decade. If we're creating new jobs, new good jobs in Montgomery County, suddenly you have a lot fewer people having to travel south on 270 and on the Beltway every day because they're staying not just in Montgomery County, but up county, Germantown, Clarksburg, around there. The best way, I don't care what you do to the roads really, the best way to reduce gridlock is to have fewer people having to go that way, and it would help Montgomery County's economy. Wouldn't be so worried about those $30 million because you'd have a lot more revenue already, and then it'd be a lot easier to deal with the road problems. So.
Well, that's one way. Is there a way forward if the governor and the county politicians oppose each other's preferred approach, Mike?
It does make it difficult. The reality is, though, building on kind of what Evan said, is both of those solutions I think we need to have. One of the reasons we ended up putting the Corridor Cities Transitway in and we then changed the zoning was to encourage exactly that. Let's put jobs where people live, which will then pull people from getting off 270. And so then as we actually address 270 and widen that to what it needs to be, we now have the ability for free-flowing traffic there as well. And so the challenge is going to be, can the county come forward and say, do we want to adopt this project? Or can our delegation actually stand together for one time and actually hold firm and say, we need to have a transit project in the county and be able to move this forward and have the state pay for it? It's going to be challenging. I'm hopeful that the governor can actually move forward on the 270 plan, because we just can't stay still anymore. We've got to, stay still anymore. A little ironic that we say that, but the reality is we've got to go forward with something. At least he has a plan on the table, and that's ahead of where we are in the county.
See, I think we're missing something here. What about privately operated, privately funded transportation? Because there's nothing that says the government has to pay for the buses or the trains for that matter. And if you have it done in the private sector, it will adapt as time goes on. You will notice that there are patterns that you can serve, and then you serve it. Over time, those patterns will change, and you'll serve that. Scheduling, routes, you name it. Mm-hmm. The one thing that will be important is that you can't go from something successful privately operated like Uber that becomes something unsuccessful and government regulated like Uber. And that's where, and actually Uber and even now the scooters and the bikes and so on, where those options are being taken away because someone has a great idea to regulate it, control it, and centrally direct it. And that's the problem with all of this.
Cynthia, now you don't have to go on Quarter Cities or 270.
No, I live in the transit-rich, walkable, dense southeast county. And so, but it would be better even for someone like me as a taxpayer and somebody in Montgomery County if we could figure this out so that we have something viable and sustainable, so we can grow the parts of the county, especially our economy. I mean, we're stymied if we don't have the infrastructure to be able to go forward with master plans in that part of the county and bring more employers and development in. So we have a little bit of a chicken and an egg problem between the infrastructure and the growth.
Phil, I'm going to come back. I mean, fare box revenues don't cover the cost of public transportation, mass transit now. So
that's a popular Cato talking point that we've heard. It actually started with federal government when they began regulating passenger transportation years ago and continued with state. There's no reason why magically, if we decide to, sell sandwiches over the counter, we can cover the cost of doing that. But the minute that someone steps inside a bus or a train, it's wildly unprofitable all the time, forever. You have to look at the accounting systems, number one. You have to look at how the allocations take place, number two. And let's be honest, when you think about someone like a Greyhound going long distance, when you think about Delta Airlines and otherwise, they make money. They cover their fare box. Why is it that it couldn't happen with high volume local transit? Why is it that it can't happen on rail either? There's simply no reason other than 50, 60, 70 years of accounting systems that don't work and government operation.
One of the challenges that we have here is where we're trying to serve that public transit, we have yet to build the density. And so if we can actually, we've encouraged the zoning to occur there, but the thing that need to make that happen is to put the infrastructure in place. And so we're in a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, because I think you're exactly right. If we can get the density in places like Germantown and Clarksburg, which is what we've zoned to do, now we can actually start to be able to support that, because people can use that and get back and forth into jobs that are near where they actually live. And until we can do that, it's going to be really hard, and it's one of the things our current county executive is very opposed to. I want to do bus rapid transit, but we know that we don't necessarily get the fare box recovery that we need, but I don't want to add density to actually get the fare box recovery. So you kind of can't have it both ways. You've got to go forward with one or go forward with the other, but you can't kind of either don't put the transit in or put the density in so we can actually make it work.
Now, Evan, we do have lots of density along Metro. I mean, we have build up Metro, but there are some gaps there. Should we be focusing on Metro ahead of some of these other initiatives?
I mean, personally, I'd love to see Metro continue. I'm in Germantown, so I'd love to see the Metro continued up further north. There's the MARC station in Germantown, but it'd be a lot more convenient. You don't have to change if you're just going down the red line. So I'd like to see that in addition to a widening of 270, because then, just to go back to what I was saying before, this gives people the option. Some people, if there's a Metro in Clarksburg or Germantown, great, I'll hop on that. Now there's less cars on the road, and the people who choose to still use their car because they have a life outside of your commute can do so. I just can't comprehend that the brightest minds in the world can't figure out a way to make both happen.
You sound like you're an all of the above solutions advocate.
Yeah, you got a lot of people.
Stay tuned for parting shots. Well, leading off with parting shots, Evan Young.
So let me bring you back to earth after all the good Nats news. The Redskins continue to embarrass. Latest story about Trent Williams. It turns out that he had cancer on his scalp for 6 years, where he was told that it wasn't anything to worry about by the team doctors. Just the latest embarrassment of the Bruce Allen, Dan Snyder era. Something to point out here, though. This is failure by everyone involved. First of all, the team doctors that are orthopedic surgeons and sports medicine doctors are not world-class dermatologists and oncologists who could go ahead and tell Trent Williams whether or not he had cancer from their evaluation. And Trent Williams has every resource on earth, if this continued to concern him for 6 years, to get it checked at any time during any off-season on his own, get a second opinion. Not nearly as serious. I had a knee injury in college that was wildly misdiagnosed until didn't seem right to me. I went and got a second opinion. 4 surgeries later, I'm glad I did not listen to that team doctor. But just the latest embarrassment, while other people are winning championships, Redskins continue to embarrass.
Phil?
Well, thank you, Mark. I'd like to talk about now former Congresswoman Katie Hill. Not only was it bad enough that she managed to do a bunch of things that had a male member of Congress done these things, he would have been run out of town on a rail, or maybe 2 rails, since we were talking about trains earlier. She's now complaining that it was somehow improper for her pictures to be shared. Look, here's a message to everybody out there. If you don't want your pictures of whatever to become public, don't pose for them, don't take them. Assume it will. And that's all.
Cynthia?
All right, back to sports. I'll be at the Washington Nationals World Series parade celebration tomorrow. And I'm going to be thinking that I owe Davey Martinez a big apology, because I was one of those Nats fans in May and June who wanted his head. I was unhappy with Davey Martinez as a manager. I was frustrated with the bullpen, but I really took it out on Davey. And I hope that he wins Manager of the Year this year, because he certainly deserves it. And go Nats, I'll see you tomorrow.
Mike, you get the last word.
Well, it's an exciting week in Montgomery County, because at the University of Shady Grove, we're going to unveil a new $175 million biosciences and medical engineering building. Right now, we have 3,000 students who are taking courses there. This will allow us to increase up to 7,500 students in primarily STEM disciplines to help grow our workforce, and as Evan indicated, to really focus on our economy and make that grow and be robust. So it's going to be fun.
Well, thank you for our panelists for this show, and be sure and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and also listen in Just a reminder that this week our show will be at least on a little bit differently because, of course, we've got the change of the season, although it'll be on the correct time, but you get to sleep in an extra hour before you take the show. So thank you all for listening to 21 This Week, Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show.